What is going on, everyone? Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Hire Me Podcast live show. My name is Kristin, and I am running solo today without my co host, Heather Balcerek, which is totally okay, not to blame her or anything. She had some other commitments that she needed to take care of, which is way okay. So, again, if you're new to this program, new to this podcast, this video podcast, the Hire Me podcast is focused on elevating today's top talents by creating essentially video resumes for job seekers in order for them to stand out from the crowd of the hundreds and thousands of resumes that are out there, the applications, the cover letters, right? We wanted to be able to showcase a way for employers to be able to understand who a person is and what their values are and what skills they can bring into a role in a very short way form of content. So if you are watching, you are not subscribed to us or following us on YouTube or any podcast platform, please go find us on YouTube here. Click that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you are watching on LinkedIn, make sure you subscribe to us as well. One quick call to final quick call to action. If you're joining us live right now, or you're watching this after the fact, you're watching the recording, please add in the comments, engage. This is an engaging conversation where we can go back and forth, have a conversation. You can ask questions, you can bring up your thoughts, whatever you want. And we are here to have a conversation. And joining me on this conversation today is a talent acquisition leader, Kristin Carlson. Let me bring her up. Kristin,
Hi.
welcome. It's good to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's a delightful way to start the week.
Yeah,
Happy Monday.
happy Monday. I know it's been you and I were talking right before we went live, right? Like
Yeah.
it's been a pretty good weekend. It's been a pretty good last week for the two of us. Um However, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now, right? Um, Not just from like the labor market, but just like things going on in the world, especially here in the
Yeah.
US. It's pretty nuts. So, um, you know, as a talent acquisition leader, I want you to kick it off. Like, please introduce yourself to those who are
Yeah.
watching either live or who are watching the recording.
Yeah.
And what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah. No, thanks so much for having me. And you're right. It's an interesting time, I think, in the job market in the world, as you said, right? And I think I'm just excited that you and Heather do things like this where you bring people on and you're helping people get more visibility for jobs. And so thank you so much for doing that. I think just in account of this market, right? Like people need all the help that they can get. And so I think, something I wanted to talk a little bit about today was how, my career, I have over 15 years of talent acquisition, recruitment experience at small companies, large companies. I even started my career in nonprofits. And when you're focused on hiring and then all of a sudden it flips on you, and you're looking for a job, right? And so that's the predicament I'm in right now. I have been laid off twice in 2023, which just it happens once and then it happened again pretty quickly after I found a new opportunity. And so I'm kind of at this point where it's like I want to help people, especially that find themselves unfortunately in this situation. And I have a lot of people in my network and colleagues who just are TA or recruitment professionals right now, or HR professionals even, that are just it's wild. Like it's but I think we can, if you will learn anything from these type of people and professionals, that they're resilient and we're resilient and we'll get through this and figure it out. So that's really been my attitude, as I try to navigate this and give people advice and also, try to find something for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I just pulled it up, right?
Yeah.
Layoffs.fyi. I mean, we're approaching very quickly, unfortunately, 200,000
Yeah.
layoffs from people in the tech sector alone, right? I didn't realize Shopify last week went through
Yeah.
layoffs. They laid off 2,300 people. Like that's insane. I mean, something that we've seen over the last 6, 7, 8 months, right, is this um contraction of the market
Yeah.
because of what happened from the pandemic, right? Because of the
Exactly.
pandemic, we saw a quick contraction, but then this huge uh, explosion of growth from all of these organizations, and they just hired and hired and hired. And seemingly, with a lot of stories that have come out from individual employees, they were hired just to be warm bodies in those organizations, not necessarily to like move projects or initiatives forward. And
Right.
so now we're seeing like a lot of those kind of roles being eliminated.
Yeah.
Because of that, what are you seeing from like a talent acquisition recruiting standpoint? Like with like how do those people who were kind of just brought in thinking that they were going to work on something really cool all of a sudden like they've been laid off? Like what would your advice to them be in this market? Be like, look, there are those TikTok stories and articles of they're like, I got brought in and I worked maybe 5-10 hours a week because they just didn't have work for me. What would you tell those people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And I think, I've experienced this. So I would joke in the last year, like everywhere I go, things have really started to slow down, right? And you're in a situation where, you feel like you got hired, but how do you make an impact? Like, how do you hit the ground running? It always feels like you're ramping up and never really like adding value. And I think, it's tough because, for example, in my last role, I was hired to build out the talent acquisition team and implement the ATS and get all that and I did that, and then they just didn't start hiring again, right? And so then it's like you kind of do that, ramp up and go down. And I think, my advice would be, and I approached the last time I was looking for a job for as like, maybe I don't want to go to a big company because that doesn't seem safe right now. I'll try a startup. And then like that didn't turn out to be like safe or stable either. So I think it's just so hard because I think people are trying to make sense of it, right? Why did you hire me and then let me go? Why am I been here for 10 years and then now I'm getting let go? And I think there's so many people in this situation that are thinking the same thing. And I think it's just really important that you're not alone and other people are going through this. And, I think what I've seen in my network are people reaching out to help, but like the most helpful is people who can be specific. Like, I will help you by X, I will introduce you to this person, right? And I don't expect anybody to do all the work and find the job for me, but I think the offers to help are nice, but if you can do more actions like you are doing, right, to help people get a job, like that is just so much more encouraging. And I just encourage people to connect with their network, stay positive. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's so true, right? And understand it's not you as a person, it's not anything to do with that. It's just really this market. And like I've never been laid off until this year. I've laid my teams off in the past, which is also not a fun side to be on. But I think that, when you look at what's going on right now, you're right? It's a result of COVID. And it's something that's, I don't know. It's like we have to weather through it and see where we come out. And I think just being supportive of people, checking in on people, like
Yeah.
it's I don't know. And then as a recruiter, I would say that for people hiring right now, you have to really like give some people a benefit of the doubt, right? Like I have a couple short things on my resume. Was it my fault? No, right? When you apply for a job, like you may not have like hire for potential, right? You may not have every single thing on that job list. You may be being like, there's so many people, I'll find the perfect person, right? But there's just lots of people out there, right, who can add value. And so I think for job people are hiring to consider that, right? And you hear a lot about ghosting and not hearing back. And I think too that it's just wild because in the same time, a lot of these recruitment teams are losing recruiters and people and they're short staffed. And so they're trying to keep up with all the influx of applicants. And so also like show them a little grace too, I think.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, that kind of goes to, one part of the conversation around. I'm trying to rack my brain right now of where I saw this article, but
Yeah.
the lack of kindness that is being shown within organizations right now
Yeah.
is at an all-time low.
Hmm.
Um, Employees don't feel like their coworkers are showing enough kindness to them, right? And so, and that extends beyond the four walls of the
Right.
organization, right? That kind of ripples out to customers, that ripples out to candidates, and those sort of things. And it's so frustrating when we look at um, how both sides kind of blame each other, right? Recruiters blame candidates for not being responsive or not being,
Yeah.
communicative. And then same thing on the other end. I mean, how can we show each other more compassion in this market? Like, what would you do both from a TA side and from a
Yeah.
candidate side, like to show that you are recognizing that other person, to show a little bit more kindness so you can,
Yeah.
I mean, on both ends, it gives you a leg up, right? In that process anyway.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I'm doing a little bit of contract work right now. So I'm hiring people in the market as well I look. So this is very relevant. And I think, you know, from a candidate perspective, I always encourage people, have multiple things. Like, don't just bank on one opportunity, right? Like, have multiple things going. I think you still have to be responsive as a candidate. Know that there's a lot of people probably competing for the job that you're doing, right? Just don't take something to take it and leave. I mean, make sure it's the right fit for you. And I would encourage just, checking in with recruiters. Like, recruiters are so busy, especially in this market. So anything you can do to stand out, whether it's like, hey, I checked in at like this many days after my interview, right? Like, usually recruiters aren't annoyed by that. So I think just being a candidate, showing you want to work there. Whenever I get a job that I'm excited about, I want to make sure they know that I'm interested, and stay like connected with the recruiter, the hiring manager, as
Yeah.
much as I can. So from that perspective, yeah.
I mean, for me, as I was jobs hunting myself,
Mhm.
I'm writing emails and follow-ups and things like that.
Yeah.
As a recruiter,
Yeah.
someone on the hiring side, do you feel like it's ever too much whenever a job seeker is like, "Thank you so much. I really appreciate it." Like, do you actually feel that, or do you feel like, "Oh, this is just kind of fluff?" Like, what's your view on those kind of communications?
Yeah, and I think, and it's funny because I'm writing all those thank you notes too,
Yeah.
and being like, "What would I do if I read this?" Right? And so I think, um, you don't have to be like overly like, don't write a note just to write a note, right? Like, say something in that note that you remembered from the interview, or something about your skill that stands out, right? Like, because you're going to send a thank you note. I would encourage people to do it. It doesn't hurt. I always like it when I get them. It just shows that you put some time into whatever I was doing to help with the process. And I think hiring managers are the same. Like, I've had hiring managers say, hey, like, they didn't even write me a note. And, I know it seems like something that you have to do, but you could just make it quick and something funny or something that shows your personality. I think it's always a good idea, to continue to do that. Because again, too, like, if you are juggling a lot of different candidates, a lot of different requisitions as a recruiter, right? Like, you're going to remember those people who took the extra step, and who reached out with you and checked in on you and just were nice to you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you're right, like you were saying earlier, the lack of kindness, right? And I think it goes both ways. And I think hearing some of these, I guess, for lack of better words, horror stories about recruiters in the market right now who are ghosting, not responding, um, it, it's it's just like, oh, like, I would never do that as a recruiter, right? Like, sometimes it does happen, but I would say to recruiters and talent professionals right now, like, you also have to be kind, right? It's not just all these candidates at your disposal and you're going to do whatever you want. Like, that's not the mentality. I would say I've always put a lot into candidate experience. I think it's really, really important. And it also tells you a lot about an organization, right? And so if you're trying to
Mhm.
represent an organization in a positive way, then don't do that stuff. So,
Yeah. I mean, if you had your, talent acquisition magic wand to transform the candidate experience,
ooh,
like what is
I like this question.
what is like the top? I it's always hard to pick like one thing. So like what are like the biggest things that you see in the market or that are happening in organizations that you would be like, you know what, this needs to go or this absolutely needs to transform? Like what are some of those things?
I think really like getting back to people is important, like either way. I think just not hearing from a company is just, it's so disheartening. And I know you're getting a lot of applications, right? Especially for recruiters. Something will post and then 40 minutes later there's 400 applications, right? So I think having a system set up so that you are at least getting back to people who took the time to apply. I still get rejection notes from the time I was applying for the last job that I lost, right? So it's like, let's just be mindful of people's like time, and just knowing is better, right? And
Hmm.
being transparent is better. I think also for candidate experience, something I really look for is like set the stage up front, right? Like say, this is the role, this is our timeline, this is the process, and don't change it a million different ways. Like that's actually caused me to pull out of some recruiting processes because it's like, do you even know kind of what you're doing or looking for? Um, so I would say that is another thing I would say in my magic wand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, right, I'm always looking at how do we center the human experience a bit
Yeah.
more? How do we make processes more human?
Yeah.
How do we make it more compassionate? Um, from your standpoint, one thing that I have always thought that should occur in the recruiting process or the candidate experience is, people are being rejected for a reason,
Right.
right? Is there a way to make that more human at a scale in a scalable way, right? Like, so
Mhm.
for your example, 400 applications in like an hour, in less than an hour, which I definitely see. Is there a way for individual job seekers to get a note saying, "Hey, you know what? You had these great skills. However, we're looking for someone who has a bit more experience, or we're looking for someone who has a bit more skill set in like this certain process, or who has done this," versus the generic, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we're just moving forward with another candidate," or like your skills don't match to the position at the moment. Like, is there a different way to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard after like an application. It's that's you're talking about like to do that in a scalable way. And that's why I talked about like these touch points, like just knowing either way is helpful, like whether or not you're being considered or what happened with the job or if you took the posting down, right? Because I think it's also, it can be really frustrating for a job seeker to like apply for something, get rejected, and then see the position reposted, right? And that goes back to just like being really clear about what you're looking for when you post a job. It goes back to creating a job description that's inclusive and it reflects the position, and being really upfront about what the needs to have, what the bonuses are to have. Like I think all of that, if a company can do that up front, that's great. To make it more personal, I will always give a candidate feedback if they ask, right? So as a candidate, reach out and ask. I mean, you may not hear back, but I think it's something I pride myself in that I do, right? Like for example, with candidates that make it to the last rounds of an interview, they've been through our process. I mean, I always call them. I never send them an email. Like it's like, you spent all this time with us, then I deserve a 5-minute phone call.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think it's really important for recruiters and talent acquisitions team to ask for feedback. Like, how is our process going? Like, how are you feeling about this? Like, could we do better? Right? Because it's definitely a two-way street. It's not just, hey, I'm going to post a job and have all these people try really hard to work there. And I think as a candidate, it can feel like that some way. But I think, you have to understand kind of what you said, like kindness and what's going on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, as we're wrapping up and we're coming up on time, what final thoughts do you have to share either about the market or what's going on? Like, yeah, what do you want to leave people with right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just it's hard, but we've been in this kind of situation. I think even if you haven't personally, other people in your network have. And so, I mean, I remember when I posted that I lost my job again, right? It's kind of embarrassing. And you're like, oh, I got laid off again. Like, how many times? And somebody posted and was like, this, happened to me last year. I've been through the exact same thing. I could have written this. So I think just knowing that like other people are going through this, that you're not the only one, not taking it personally, um, and just take care of like your mental health through this process, right? Like, and I know a lot of people say that it's easier said than done, because you feel like if you're not sitting on in front of a computer applying for 100 jobs a day, then you're not trying. And I think it's just like, be creative, be smart, do things like you're offering, with the Hire Me interviews, like about your back. I think these are fantastic, just different ways to kind of use your energy there instead of just burning yourself out. And I know it's hard, right? Because it's a job, and it's people have families and bills to pay, and it's stressful. But I think, I more and more in my feed, I see people getting jobs. So I think it will turn around, and just be kind to yourself while you're waiting for it to happen.
Yeah. Seems like kindness is definitely our theme
Yeah.
today. So, kindness to others, right? But kindness also to yourself, right?
Yeah.
I again, it sounds cliche, however, I think it's so true. Like the ups and downs of job hunting are really there, and
Mhm.
know that if you hit a low point, just do know that A, it does get better, and
Yeah.
B, there's hundreds of people out there that are willing to help.
Yeah.
Um, quite literally, like I've had, posts where I've asked for help and people have like jumped on it. So, I guess actually final question on my end is, do you think that I've seen more vulnerable posts around job hunting more
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. Do you think that's too much? Do you think that's okay? Like,
I think it's up to you, right? Like, I think some people feel this sense of like desperation, and then some people I know like don't even post that they've lost their job, because they may make them feel like vulnerable, right? So I think, yes, it's okay, like what you're comfortable with. You never know. Like when I posted the second time that I lost my job, somebody saw it and reached out to me for an interview, right? So it can be like, it doesn't hurt. I would just keep it professional, as possible, and really be clear about what you're looking for, like what your skills are, instead of just, I need a job, desperate, I'm help. It's like, hey, network, can you help me? Like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I need. Like, be really specific about what you need and what you're
mhm,
asking from, as we talked about earlier, right? Having somebody saying, oh, I'm going to help you out and just let me know, right? But if you can also be specific about what you're asking for, I think that could be really helpful with your search. Then people know how to help.
awesome. Well, Kristen, where can people connect with you? Where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, everyone's favorite. So feel free to hit me up there. I'm also happy, to look at resumes at this time. I'm have years of looking at them, so I'm happy to help with anybody. Yeah, so feel free to connect with me, email me, chat with me. I'm in this with you, so happy to help
Yeah.
any way that I can, but with a specific way of helping. So
Yes.
just let me know what you need.
Very cool. Well, if you're watching this right now, Kristen's uh, LinkedIn profile is linked here. It's showing up on the screen. If you're listening to this on the podcast, we'll be sure to put it in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Well, Kristen, again, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining me today. Your interview is going to be coming out later this week, the
Yeah.
one that you and I are going to do. So I'm excited to do that.
Me too.
Um, yeah. So again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching this live or you're watching this after the fact or listening after the fact, not a problem. Happy to have had this conversation with you all. Again, if you are job hunting or you know someone who is job hunting, make sure that they get on Heather and my calendars to do the Hire Me podcast. Again, it's a very quick 15-minute call where we create a video resume for you that you can send to hiring managers and hiring teams. And again, as always, make sure you subscribe and follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn. And if you're listening to us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, please hit that follow and like button and give us a rating. Thank you again so much and have a great week.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.
Bye.